Welcome to the Starting Over podcast. I'm your host, Edward Shelton, aka Dark Logos, and this is a show that we look at the strategies, tactics, and mechanics behind the game of heroclix. Today is going to be a little bit interesting. Had the pre-release for the Avengers Defenders War. Learned a lot. What I'm going to do is this for today's show. I'm going to talk in brief about Avengers Defenders War, my understanding in which the game is going, because I think right now, we have all the characters spoiled, and part of me wants to not make this a full set review. And I want to say the set review for next week, where I'm not recording, right before I really need to go to bed to be functional for work in the morning. With that being said, I'm just going to sort of pontificate about some things that I see coming from a design perspective from playing Avengers Defenders War, and also just looking at how Wizkids has been acting in the last few sets. Okay, so let's get started. I did Avengers Defenders War sealed. I pulled crap. Sometimes that just happens in sealed. And what ended up happening was I played 2 games. I got 1 bye. I had 1 win and 1 loss, and I lost to a guy that really just only shows up during sealed. He's not a horrible player. It's just that I knew in this situation that I lost because of pulls. He pulled pretty well. I pulled crap. And so he did way better than me. And I did okay trying to, do some shenanigans. But it wasn't enough to pull out a win, I'll tell you that much. So the first thing that I ended up remembering from the whole event was, in the back of my mind the entire time, I said, this feels familiar. And I was like, where have I had this sealed sort of playscape feeling before? And it's like, oh yeah, Sinister. 9 attack, 10 attack, 18 defense. Yeah, Sinister. This is the last time I felt that. And in talking with a couple of my teammates that's played sealed, that's pretty much what it's like. If you just sort of scan through, you do have a couple of 11 attacks, but it's like 10-18, 10-17, 10-19. Like, you just look around and you're going to see that you're going to at least need to roll with most characters 8 or better in some situations. And that means a lot. Definitely when you're talking about with defenders sharing defense, and they're sharing an 18, or, I don't think they could share a 19 in sealed off the top of my head, so don't quote me. There's a lot of interesting things with that. But when you start understanding when you're having a 10 on an 18, a 9 on an 18, a 10 on a 19, plus tiny and hindering, blah, 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 blah. All of a sudden, prob is like gold. But if the game continues going down this path, what you're actually seeing is, I would say, a false polarity. And I'm going to make that really clear. All right, this set is not good from a stat perspective. Majority of these figures are trash. I'm just going to say that now. Majority of these figures are trash from a stat perspective, and I want to make that very clear. From a power perspective, they go from moderate to above average, and some of them are strong. There's only really about a handful that I think that are like tier 1 meta, but mainly just because of their place in the game. and just because of what you need right now. But from a stat perspective, what we're really looking at is Wizkids saying, hey guys, we know that we've made the game hyper mobile, but so the game isn't just purely alpha strikes. We also made some concessions, so we had some higher defenses, lower attacks. Yeah, you can still get your team in there, but they're going to be, 10 attacks on 18s and 19s, 9 attacks on 18s and 19s. There are going to be some 17s, and those guys are going to get beat up, but they're going to be compensated by having most likely 11 attack. Now, some of you might say, but hey, Dark Logos, there's this magical power called Perplex, in which I can mod up my attack. And I'm like, yes, that is true. There is this magical power called Perplex, which you can mod up your attack. But also look back at this wonderful character from, Civil War storyline OP called Yellow Jacket, who has the ability to pretty much pick one slot or one stat and then say to his whole entire team within range and line of fire, hey guys, all of you all have +1 on that stat due to my magical, universal, brilliant tactician Perplex. Oh yeah, and I don't need to be a theme team when I do this. Yeah, that happens. So what we're realistically looking at is, even though you can have a Perplex and up your attack and whatnot, the same thing can happen back, not also including hindering terrain bonuses, this, that, and the other yakety smackety. Okay. So when we are looking at this disparity, what was this like the prime meta of? Poison. Lamp was birthed in this era. Okay. So, well, around this era. And so when you start looking at that, when we start looking at how, for the future rules, how poison's really sort of nerfed, I think that's intentional. I really do think that's intentional, and here's why I say I think that is directly intentional. First off, and really first and foremost, there's enough older players in the play testing pool, I assume, that's lived through various phases of the game. Number two is that if you start taking away a lot of, damage reduction, and you stop it so that outwit does not happen at the beginning of the turn, then all of a sudden characters have to deal with damage reduction. Okay, poison. You can't just swarm a bunch of cheap free poison on top of somebody and be like, "Ha ha, gotcha, son." Also considering that they introduced Black Panther at 30 points. Shifting focus Black Panther at 30 points into this mess. I just think Wizkids is high, because they shouldn't have never introduced a 30-point Black Panther with outwit and stealth at 30 points. Like it's almost as if they forgot the classic flaws of Gen 1 game design and just went full stupid when they made him. And what I'm finding interesting and really amusing is I've clamored for some really powerful black characters, and I'm getting them, and I feel dirty inside because most of them are broken. But I don't know. Like, is this black privilege? I guess this is what black privilege feels like and black guilt feels like. I guess. Okay, so anyway, so we can start to see that they're in toning down outwit and toning down poison. Defense has a purpose, but it also, you can start to see that a lot of these really super high defenses don't have damage reduction. So that's a key element. And then also we can, take some steps further, is that poison isn't overcoming a lot of different stuff, and there's still a place in the game for good raw stats. There's still a place in the game for outwit. There's still a place in the game for poison. It just doesn't, like, all of these different things do not solve every problem like they used to, which made them completely dominating effects. The next element that I've just been noticing is that when we're combining this high mobility and these situational attackers and non-attackers, so like for example, Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange by far is a mandatory piece for everybody to have. Both versions of the shifting focus and also the title character. And the main reason that Doctor Strange is a mandatory character is that at 50 points, regardless of you're using his trait or not, he's able to carry two characters with a 12 movement, which after the new rules changes is still going to be a 10, no different than what it is right now. Okay, so on teams that don't want to necessarily invest in a TK, but want to invest into a taxi, but has a few amount of characters, and they're mainly, doing, insane amounts of damage and support, whatever that may be, Doctor Strange is a premier piece. And then, once you're transitioning past the taxi stage, he can shift into a very mediocre attacker. That's all he needs to be. He shouldn't be this magical wielding, prop throwing, I energy explode the world Doctor Strange. He should be a freaking, man, my wand is sparking. Oh crap, like the movie Doctor Strange where he's still learning freaking magic food. That's who that Doctor Strange should be. Okay, so they got that right. All right, he's competent, but he's not killing Caecilius. Okay, he's not thinking about that. He already knows Caecilius could whoop his butt, and if it wasn't for that magical freaking cloak, he would be dead. Okay, so that's balanced. Okay, but what we're bound to see, or which I feel game design is trying to shift towards, is pointless beginning of the game only figures. And this is why I hate Jean Grey. I have two of them. I got two Fast Forces, two of those X-Men Fast Forces here. One of them isn't even open, just for that stupid Jean Grey. Okay, so I'm not one to talk. I bought the money. I dropped the money. So if you want to call me a hypocrite, feel free in the comments below. All right, I'll take it in stride. All right. So I don't like her because she's not useful 9 times out of 10 past the first 3 turns. Once you get into a mid-game engage, you rarely have the time or the energy to get her in reposition unless you have a taxi. And now you've invested 85 points, 90 points on mobility. That doesn't give you a lot of points left for, prob, perplex, unless those things are built in to your primary attacker. And that causes certain problems because most characters that have prob and perplex and other things like that built into them only have those powers for a set number of clicks up front, like 2 or 3 clicks. Sometimes in the case of Jakeem, it's 4. But even still, like once you lose those key powers off of, your main attacker, then you're really at a huge disadvantage. So when we start looking at characters like Jean Grey, Fast Forces Jean Grey, she's really not that good. Her attack is okay. Her damage value is crap. Her defense is okay. She doesn't have damage reduction, but she does have willpower. She has X-Men team ability, which is great, which means that she can possibly heal one of your wild cards up a click or your X-Men up a click. That's it. And she may or may not take feedback. So I find that whole affair not that great. And if you have a character on your team that's the main attacker using objects, well, guess what? You've pretty much taken away any secondary damage that Jean Grey could do. So she's not really synergistic with a lot of characters when you start transitioning to mid and end game. Enter Doctor Strange. Doctor Strange has penetrating damage on his shifting focus, and he has a high mobility on his, pretty much I carry around everybody opening portals, Doctor Strange. If you need to retreat, you can easily, for free action, shift to whichever you need. And that's the key element, is shifting to what you need. And I think that leads into sort of my next point, which is once ID cards die, Wizkids has to justify sideboard. They put something in place that is necessary, but at the same time, they did not want to treat it like card games. So, for anybody who never played CCG, which I doubt there is anyone listening to this show, but just in case you haven't, in most CCGs, you're able to have your main deck. Then with your main deck, you have an additional sideboard. Your sideboard has like special cards for certain matchups. Depending on the game, you can take out a set amount of cards and add in your sideboard, or just flat add in your sideboard, or take cards out at random and then add in your sideboard. Okay? I've seen it done all these different ways. The main idea is that if you encounter this bad matchup for you, you can put things in your deck that helps you solve for that matchup. So you're not like just constantly having, that super WAP card in there just for the Master of Kung Fu deck, and and you never play one, but you deal with freaking Paladins of Badoom all day, then you don't need that card. But those freaking Kung Fu Grandmasters deck, if that comes in, you automatically lose. So you have a sideboard. Okay, heroclix in and of itself should have a sideboard, and I think that's one mechanic in the game that people complained about for years, is that there wasn't any adaptability once play started with the teams. And so Wizkids came back and said, hey, here's AE, that didn't work right, here's split and merge, that didn't work right, okay, because they were high in how the mechanic worked, and that mechanic should have never existed. But hey, that's just me, an old school player talking, who debated Wizkids and the rules team the entire time when they were trying to roll out split and merge, of how stupid it was. But who am I? I'm just some guy on the internet. Okay, you have all these different attempts in which they tried to use sideboard, and then now we get ID cards, and then we get shifting focus. An ID card showed us that you could have this one turn adaptable element to deal with your opponent, and that could be great. At the other end, you could have this one turn, I just screw over my opponent completely type effect. And that's the part about ID cards I think Wizkids fully didn't understand with the scope and magnitude of their product. That with certain cards and certain characters, with their history and catalog, they are broken. Like the level 7 card should have never existed. It doesn't fit thematically. Well, let me rephrase that. It fits thematically, but from a game design perspective, it should have never existed. It would have balanced out a lot of gameplay. At the same time, it would have hard forced, and I really do mean it, would have hard forced a lot of the meta to make the choice, am I playing Nick Fury or am I not playing Nick Fury? Instead of saying, I have a 5-point pocket cannon Nick Fury. And Nick Fury at 120 points is a high investment, but then you have characters like Riddler. You have now like Riddler, characters like Sharon Carter. Who else has like a can't use? Howard the Duck. All these like new all these other characters now have a place. If you decide not to run Nick Fury, you have to run some other little dude. And in the case of Peggy Carter, who by far is one of the better can't use characters because hers is like an AoE effect, you now have to sacrifice a prime slot. And I'll get into primes in a little bit. And to why there not being any primes is important. So when you start looking at this like flexible dynamic that's there now, trying to take away powers in the ID cards with the sideboard. Sorry, let me go back further. When you start looking at the flexible dynamic of the sideboard, Wizkids saw how strong and useful it was, but also how abusive as all get out it was. And it was also their fault that they introduced a mechanic like ID cards between ages or between blocks. And then they created ID cards that were going to be existing in multiple blocks after all IDs are gone. They're still going to be existing. I think to my knowledge, actually no, I'll take that back. To my knowledge, when the con IDs retire, I think they all will be retired. I'm not quite sure on the Lex Luthor, Sentry, Tigra one. I may be wrong on those. I hope I'm not, but whatever. Okay. Same problem with Giant Man, and you shouldn't have a Colossal Retaliator still in play when Colossal Retaliators could be retired. You can't have a whole bunch of characters or mechanics cross blocks without you actually intending for them to be part of the atmosphere. And if at some point in time you're like, yeah, let's not do this anymore, you've pretty much have to make hard counters to that mechanic to remove it completely from being played in the format. And creating silver bullets in this game is horrible because they're good for very little else. They either murder everything like Bullseye did back in the day, or they're so specific like Blue Devil that they're not useful. Anyway, so when we go back to that sideboard, without AE, without split and merge, which I think that's another reason why it went away, was to free up sideboard. And also the fact that they're freaking stupid. And anyway, with the freed up sideboard, you now have to fill it with something. And so the shifting focus for now allows you to pick 2 or 3 characters and have them shift back and forth. You could still play Superman. You could still play Deadpool and Deadpool. You could play them both on the same team. I wouldn't recommend it, but you could. But the problem comes in is that if you play too many shifting focus characters, you have to make hard decisions about what roles your shifting focus character is going to make and what roles they're not going to fill. That is important. I think that's going to be a bigger deal down the road. Okay? And I think that's going to be a huge deal. Definitely when you start looking at Superman, when you start looking at Deadpool, when you start looking at Doctor Strange, and I think after the new rules, Batman might be actually viable as a meta character for shifting focus. Definitely considering that he has that charge 12 attack, and also he has, I think, one outwit and another one with running shot in cap off the top of my head. All right, so when we see this flux, there's a couple of problems. Shifting focus as a mechanic and ID cards as a mechanic are not greatly simpatico when it comes to the actual sideboard state. So now, when you don't have drones to summon in high point characters, and you have to sacrifice high point characters to bring in another high point character to do the attack, you start to make your player base look at shifting focus as a more viable, more economic option for having options. Because number one, you're not spending points for having characters on the sideboard versus the ID cards for that one-time pop-in. Okay, and then number two, while the flexibility of the shifting focus characters are limited right now, as sets continue, there's going to be more and more and more and more shifting focus characters. So when it comes to the flexibility that you need, it's going to be there. And then also in the case of Deadpool, we have seen that, hey, shifting focuses can also include a prime. So that opens up a whole lot of other cool ideas. But that idea might be going down the toilet, leading into my next point. Primes most likely are dead. Primes are most likely dead. Now, some people might say, hey, Dark Logos, you're jumping the gun here. Why would primes be dead? That doesn't make sense. And I'm going to drink this water and tell you why. All right, here's why. Number one, as a mechanic, primes really didn't do anything to limit the meta. All it did was it allowed Wizkids to say, whew, these two characters can't be played together. From a design perspective, that sounds really good. From an actual reality perspective, it's really bad for a couple of reasons. Number one, you have the retirement of TAs, which all of a sudden makes, not Supreme Power, oh gosh, what are their names? It's like Squadron Supreme, which makes the Squadron Supreme team almost impossible to build due to your rules. Okay, so there's that. Now, I mean, someone could say, like, Golden Age, hey, we can still do this in Golden Age, and that's the only place where you could, or can, and you know, after the rules changes. All right, so that's one. Number two is when we start looking at the mechanics that were introduced with primes, at first they weren't really that good. Then they got more and more stupid. In the beginning of stupid was Brother Voodoo. Now, Brother Voodoo showed how mind control was overlooked because his price was low for a good like month and a half. Like he was like a $10 figure, and you could even get him cheaper than $10 in some cases if you were looking right and you were like sniping on eBay when he first came out. Now when you look at in retrospect of how stupid a lot of people were, and I know it seems bad, I'm just calling a lot of people stupid, but there's a lot of lack of insight on players' parts and Wizkids' parts. But when you look at the fact that Wizkids introduced a power on a Brother Voodoo that was very underused, and then said, hey dog, this is free. And then all of a sudden this power is overused. Like completely overused. And I think that that's a huge thing to note. And then they start saying, well, hey, what else could we make free? What else could we make hella cheap? What else could we do to, you know, make the stats cost like half as less of what they should be? And when you start looking at the primes past Brother Voodoo, you start to see this uptick of just ridiculous. This is ridiculous. And now, yes, there are some primes that everybody scratches their head or their beard, whichever place has hair, and picks at it and wonders, like, hey, why did Wizkids make that? You know, why did Wizkids make Monel as stupid strong as he was? I don't know. You know, I have no clue why they made Freddie Freeman as strong as he did. You know, I don't know. Okay. So, all in all, what does that atmosphere do? I mean, hell, we look at Jakeem right now. I love some Jakeem Thunder. I really do. I've played with that figure more than I care to admit. I've played with him more than I play Super Scroll. Okay? And I gotta say, even though they tried to nerf him, and even though they tried to limit what he can do, they really dropped the ball on him because there's too many other elements in the game that he synergizes with that covers up that weakness. As long as you have equipment function, as long as you have additional assign of power functions, as long as you really have special objects that equip as well, he is cut above the rest. He has above average stats for his cost, and he has above average power selection for his cost. And his base powers are way better than a lot of people even give him considerations for. Okay, so right there. So when we start stacking it all up, we can start seeing some problems. And then also, this is the issue where I have with Wizkids, where they try to isolate mechanics, is that when we enter into this storyboard prime mechanic, what the hell is it? Main character, whatever it is. We'll just call them Planeswalker characters. When you introduce these Planeswalker characters, them being one per force, uniques being one per force, primes being one per force, all of a sudden you get this trend that in an attempt to stop you from stockpiling these characters, we've made them one per force and then made them isolated amongst each other, and now you have to explain to a person like, okay, this character is unique, but it's not prime. And so you only can have one of this character. This other character is prime, which means you can have this character, but you can't have any other primes, and you can't have a double of this character. This other character is a planeswalker. You can still have a prime with the planeswalker, but you can't have any other planeswalker with it. And it's sort of unique, but you could play another Doctor Strange. You can play the Shifty Focus Doctor Strange if you wanted to. If what I said that just came out of my mouth even sounds a little bit confusing, imagine how a new player is going to respond to that. Just take a moment, breathe, and think about how a new player is going to take in all that information. It's going to suck, isn't it? And they're going to be confused, and there's going to be problems, and it's going to be very frustrating. And that's what, I hate to say it, that's what a lot of the player base is set up for. And you know, hand clap and God bless all the patient people that teach new players. And they keep the player base strong and somewhat viable. But even then, when you start to have to explain rarity and which figure can be on the force and which one can't, it becomes a huge problem. It becomes a huge problem. So, you know, rewinding a little bit, taking a step back, we can start to see that with them not being able to restrain themselves, the fact of, you know, what can be on the force and what can't be on the force in the introduction of the planeswalkers, they had to do something. So wrangling in one story character, or even if they so choose, 2 story characters per set, is easier to do than to wrangle in 4 primes per set. You cut your observation down by half. Okay? Just right there. You just cut your observations down by half. And you get to still use that epic action little icon or whatever. and you can still use that little graphic that you spent money on. But they don't have to worry as much. Not only that, they can put really stupid strong effects in, but you have to build them up so they're not constants like which most primes have. They have constant effects that is just stupid. Brother Voodoo, unless that power is outwitted, constantly can free action mind control. Freddie Freeman, for his point cost, cannot lose his stats. Okay? You know, Jakeem Thunder can always pick powers. So, we start to see this trend. We start to see a simplification, but it's mainly a simplification so that they can manage. Alright? They want the game to be faster and more engaging, but they also want you to roll more attacks. They want you to have complex effects, but they don't want you to have complex effects every turn. They want you to, place tokens and remove tokens, but they don't want you stacking up tons and tons of tokens or removing tons and tons of tokens. All right, so we can start seeing these little trends that says, like, the game has additional elements, but hey guys, it's not going to get completely stupid. All right, so this leads into sort of the next direction that is upcoming, is that when you start looking at equipment, what is severely lacking in the last few sets, really since, Superman, Wonder Woman, is entities. And you can argue back and forth on Proteus if you want, if he's really like an entity. I sort of look at it, but really for a classic entity set, the last ones that we got were Superman, Wonder Woman. Alright, now, because of that, we're seeing a turn away from that mechanic of characters sort of equipping and being on the force and giving powers and assigning powers that, another character may not have. And then also, increasing stats in some situations. When we start looking at all of these things, there's a couple of key elements that we can see. Number one, Wizkids wants us to invest in future object equipment. That's number one. Number two, by investing in future object equipment, it would make it so that there wouldn't be any weird overlap with other mechanics because they're phasing those out. They're phasing out entities silently. They're phasing out resources noticeably but silently. They haven't officially said no more resources. They're going to let the Punisher van exist. They're going to let Supreme Intelligence exist. They're going to let the Teleporter exist for that period of time, and then it's going to fade out quietly. Okay? They're not going to make any more. And if they do, it's going to be on a whole different paradigm independent of what they've done previously. I hope. Okay? So, when we start looking at the game shifting towards object equipment, relics sort of things, then we have the game sort of shifting back to how it was when we had giant-sized X-Men and Hammer of Thor, where everybody wanted to pick up Thor's hammer or pick up the Crimson Gem of Cyttorak. Those were defining things. When you had the Superman set with the Kryptonite, I think it was around Brightest Day, that little fast forces, somewhere around there, we started getting Brave and the Bold, I think, where we got the lanterns, the actual little lanterns, not the big giant lanterns, but we got little lanterns. Those had major effects on how we played the game. And before resources kicked in. I think even the Gamma Bomb itself as a mechanic was earth-shattering, no pun intended, of a design mechanic. But when you start looking at resources completely overshadowed all that little crap right there. Like it just like said like, oh, you were the big stuff on the block. Ha ha. I'm the Bat Belt. I'm Batman's belt. Like I'm double your points, but I make this guy so much better. And it was true. I mean, even the Infinity Gauntlet for its cost, it just made characters stupid for that playscape. You know, I played a Black Bolt, and you know, he had the Black Bolt that was able to pretty much have built-in Nova Blast. And he was able to do stupid stuff because of the Infinity Gauntlet. He was able to live through things that technically he should have died. He should have been like just wiped off the map. Even my Scroll Black Bolt. He lived through things because of the Infinity Gauntlet that he should not have as a character been able to live through. But that's just it. Resources completely imbalanced the point cost for powers, access to additional mechanics, and other things. And the main reason is that the game designers flat out said it. If we didn't give you these powers at discounted cost, you wouldn't pay full cost of what those powers are worth. Not only that, if you did have to pay full cost or even a slightly reduced cost of what the powers are worth, and this is a little thing that I think a lot of people didn't notice, is that then you would understand how the point formula would work. And they can't let that little trade secret get out. And I know some people would say it's like, but Dark Logos, really, is there a formula, blah, blah, blah. Look, here's example A, B, C, D, X, Y to the third power. I understand, you know, there's all sorts of stuff. Part of the game design formula, there's a code for stats, there's a code for powers, there's a code, there's a cost for power combinations, and there's a code for rarity. There's a code for rarity, okay? And which is why I felt the whole Prime system was dumb. Because if you look at a common Prime, it technically was getting coded similar to an uncommon. Okay, when you look at an uncommon, it was more similar power to a rare. If you look at a rare Prime, it was more similar power to a super rare, and a super rare Prime was more similar power to a chase. Okay, a chase rarity, in all honesty, has supposed to be a pinnacle cutoff. And so once you introduce an ultra chase, if you do not make that character devoid of meta effects, which, you know, somehow freaking Rainbow Gliding, My Little Pony Deadpool is not, the amount of effects for their cost that they can do is pretty much just saying like their entire dial is a resource. It's that cheap. Everything on there is cheap and or really exaggerated. And I know some people might say like, hey, Rainbow Unicorn Deadpool isn't that OP. And I'm like, look at his stats, look at his cost, look at his stats, look at the amount of powers that he has, and then, you know, really think about that. You'd be like, hey, but Rainbow Deadpool hasn't, you know, won a rock. And I'm like, he did really good in Golden Age teams, but I'll let that point drop. All right, now, when we start coming back to the state of the game, where should you, the player, be looking to? First thing I'm going to tell you, and I started bringing up this around Uncanny X-Men, start to expect to see dials between 4 to 6 clicks. That's going to be about the average now. Okay, if you're an average human person walking around, 3 clicks. Okay, is it somebody's cousin that shows up? You're a 3-clicker. Are you my lawyer? 3-clicker. Are you some guy that I have the character has conversation and tea with every Thursday? 3-clicker. Aunt May, 3-clicker. Mary Jane, 3-clicker. All of them 3-clickers, okay? They might get some cool power that says, hey, the world needs to know, or hey, perplex, hey, smoke bomb, hey, whatever. Doesn't matter. they're going to be 3 clicks. Their price is going to be somewhere between 10 points, and I'm thinking they're going to cap out around 30 points. I really don't see most of those common characters getting to 35 points unless they're like a cop or something. Then possibly. But they're still going to be like 3 or 4 clicks. They're going to go to 4 clicks if they're like they have some sort of physically active job. I'll just say that. All right, so characters using super strength have an advantage, but your primary new goal is to look for characters with sidestep, charge, super strength, or find that combination, or generate that combination. So that means that Space Mikey all of a sudden becomes really, really good. But you might say, hey, Dark Logos, why is that combination the best combination? And here's why. With the removal of Ultra Heavies, characters under 100 points all of a sudden gain more value. And if you have a character under 100 points with about 9 movement, super strength of 10 or 11 attack, and 3 base damage, they can just about one-shot or about almost one-shot a majority of characters. Because you don't have an excuse not to pack a 30-point freaking Black Panther. Really, you don't. Okay? So, the 30-point Black Panther changes so much. But I might have to get in that a little bit later. But the main point is that when we start seeing burst damage shift away from range, primarily range focused, and it shifts into a melee focused situation, and you start taking away improved targeting, and you make that harder, and you have wild cards, but not a lot of wild cards with high range, which means that you can't supplement them with Avengers Assemble TA by packing a 20-point Red Wing and then having that team ability for on the cheap. Okay, and I know a lot of people haven't really thought about that, but that's like one of the first things I was thinking about, is that you have so much stealth now, and stealth being so strong, it's like the old Batman teams. So what do you do? How do you resolve the game? Okay, like with stealth also is going to be more dominant. You're going to need charge. So charge, super strength, and a base 3 damage is more than acceptable, because now you're able to inflict 5 damage on the cheap. And with other characters being able to, pick up lights are going to encourage a more melee-focused combat system. And if you have a more melee-focused combat system, yes, range has value, but you're starting to notice is that there's less and less 7s. There are fewer 8s. I haven't seen a 12 in a long time. And 10s are really, really rare. Like, really rare. And so that means that if your range value is 6, sidestep charge, you're within a charge range. So, that's going to be the next great combination. Sidestep charge, super strength, or full move charge. Those elements are going to be killer, because now you're able to engage characters that have range and retaliate. And that's going to be huge. That's going to be huge. The next thing that I'm going to tell you is Barrier and US Agent. Those two characters, those two elements together are going to be stupid. And I'm happy to use stupid a lot. Are going to be excellent. Tubular, awesome, radical. Other synonyms for what I'm talking about. So stupid not just being bad, but also stupid being broken. Alright, so when I bring up US Agent, the main reason I bring him up is because the majority of his counterparts that have that invade my territory, a majority of them are not bad. I just feel that most people won't play Bucky, or Bucky will die before he can accomplish his mission. So that's the main reason that I'm bringing them up. And so Pretty much it goes a little something like this. By having U.S. Agent move through barrier, and I know he doesn't destroy blocking, but by having him move through barrier, eating up all your opponent's barrier, and then being able to replace that barrier, after he replaces that barrier, he can say, hey, guy, this square, this line right here, you can't draw a line of fire to me because of my shield effect. So you all that line of fire to me is blocked. I'm completely safe. And my homies can completely wreck you. Yeah, that's why U.S. Agent. Definitely in the Alan Scott meta, U.S. Agent becomes way more powerful. His ID card, way more valuable than a lot of people know or even think about in this current meta. I was sort of surprised when everybody moved to like this mystical meta with double, triple, quadruple Alan Scotts. Why didn't U.S. Agent or even Bucky for like less points show up? But barrier all of a sudden is going to become important, and the main reason barrier is going to become important is that you're going to try to mitigate the advantage of range by providing cover. And if you're able to get an action advantage where I exchange one action for one of your actions, the amount of DPS that you're able to generate in a turn is a lot less. Okay? Because you could always say that the barrier generator is not, putting up barrier, but attacking. The barrier generator character has that option. The person invading or attacking the barrier generator does not have that option. Okay, they have to invest one or more actions to negate the one action of the barrier. And when you start talking about free barrier, free walls, this, that, and the other, then all of a sudden the action advantage is exponentially in the favor of the character with barrier. And that's one of the main reasons why we've seen Alan Scott appear so much, is that the action advantage outdoes the DPS advantage for a moderate cost. I mean, a real moderate cost. Okay? So, U.S. Agent comes in, he's economical. If anything, call him in on the ID card, and he can create a great situation for a retaliatory attack, in my opinion. The other thing I think that when we're going to be moving forward and looking into what's to come, I think we're going to start seeing more characters with pick-a-power. At the same time, I don't think the pick-a-power will be as extreme as Jakeem. So we do have an Iron Man in this set that's able to, pick a couple of different powers. We also have the Chase Punisher lady. She's able to grant powers. And you have a selection of powers that you can pick from. Blades, I'm thinking like Precision Strike, Range Combat Expert, and Energy Explosion, I think. Those elements like that. And previously we've had Element Man, the one Green Lantern that can only Green Lantern Prize Support Green Lantern can only pick green powers. I could go on. Hat. I can go on and on. So we're going to see more characters with picking power that's able to pick or assign powers, but they're going to be limited to attack or they're going to be limited to damage. If we see anybody that's going to give or assign defense, it's either going to be super senses on a 6, or energy shield deflection, or I really take that back. I don't even think they're going to do energy shield deflection in CCE. It's going to be +1 from range, +1 from close. I think that's probably going to be a lot more common since we're already seeing 18 and 19 defenses. They're doing their best to bring that 23 defense. They're trying to make that a dream again. They want to make it so that that's not really possible for you to get. That's so they can rein in the game a lot. So super senses on 6, +1 defense from closer, +1 defense from range.
I don't think they'll give out regen or have a character that's able to grant regen. I really don't think that that's going to happen. If they do that, that's going to severely imbalance the game. That's going to severely imbalance the game. But I think we're going to start looking at those things. At the same time, I think offensively, what the game is going to shift to is more characters that operate very similar to Sinister Syndicate and Batman Enemy, where you're replacing attack values. But the attack values won't be like 12, 13. They're going to be 11. That's what I personally think. That's just a prediction of mine. It's going to be a stealth meta, so Superman TA, Superman TA, what improved targeting, hindering that we have, Avengers Initiative, and characters that reveal opposing characters within blank range, or characters that generate effects that turn off stealth. Those characters are going to be in a high priority, i.e., again, Alan Scott, Ace the Bat Hound, Caliban. I was going to say Caliban. And there's like another person in this set, I think, that does that. Which I don't remember right now. You know, it might come up in the set review. Those elements are going to be strong because there really isn't a direct counter to stealth as much anymore. And so because of that, stealth gaining some strength, it's not absolute, but stealth gaining some strength is a good thing, because stealth for a while was a joke. The only thing that was actually viable was like the Hand ATA and the League of Assassins ATA. And with those going away, we're at a disadvantage again. Okay, so all in all, the game as we're playing it now, before the rules changes, it's going to drastically change. It's going to drastically change. Because there's a lot of elements, I'm going to tell you, by the end of the year, you're not going to be able to use in Modern. They're just going to be gone. There's a lot of tactics that you can't use in Modern that you can use now that you won't be able to use at the end of the year. I'm just calling that right now. Okay? So because of that, it's going to require us as players to do a couple of key things. Number one, keep your options open. Don't get set into one type of play style or another. If you're on tent poles, don't get addicted to tent poles. If you're on, like, I outwit everything, don't get addicted to that. Okay? If you love Swarm, I mean, yeah, the game is going that direction really hard. Don't get addicted to Swarm. Really don't get addicted to Swarm. Not with the Kingdom Come pieces still around. Definitely with them still around. Don't get addicted to Swarm. Okay? And I know some people might say, but, Shazam can't pick up a object anymore. Oh, Shazam can hit you for 4. Because, let's just say this. You have Shazam. He's a wild card still. He is, teamed up with Batman. And he's also teamed up with Black Panther. So you have Shifty Focus Batman and you have Shifty Focus Black Panther. So Shifty Focus Black Panther moves up, outwits your combat reflexes or your charge, or you're pretty much your let's just say combat reflexes in this case because it makes it easier, and you don't have charge. And let's just say we have Alan Scott, Green Lantern, on this team just to round it off. Shazam hypersonic speeds up. He's going to take the Batman ally team ability. You already have the little cup on the character that you're going to hit. He attacks that character because you don't have combat reflexes anymore. You're going to take 4, and then once he hits, and then you're going to take 1 more for 5, and then you're going to zip back, and then you're going to be in stealth. Your opponent's going to approach again. You're going to put up barrier once again, outwit the defense power once again, and if you need to, outwit charge, and then Shazam's going to hypersonic speed up and do that same thing and hit, land the attack, and come back again. Now, some of you might, and it's going to do knockback. Now, some of you might say, Dark Logos, that's sort of weak. He's only doing 1 damage in knockback. And then what I'm going to come back to you and say is this. His burst damage has gone down, but his damage over time has gone up. His damage over time has gone up. Every hypersonic speed, super strength characters, damage has gone up. Multi-level elevation terrain. If you're a hypersonic speed, super strength flyer, that is every chance you have to play on that sort of map. You do it. You straight do it. And the main reason is this. Yes, you can't pick up an object, but you can knock a character into a wall, dealing an additional damage. You can knock a character off elevation, doing 2 damage. Every time you do that, let's just say you attack 7 times in a game, and each time you're doing 1 damage, additional damage in knockback damage. Now, 7 isn't a lot. I mean, if you think about it, it's like around 10 turns. Okay, that's about the history of a game. So in those 7 attacks, let's just say the entire time, you just knocked a character against a wall and did an additional damage. Okay, right there, you've generated more damage than having 2 standard heavies. Okay, and if you really want to argue it, you've also dealt more damage than 2 ultra heavies, but not enough as 2 ultra heavies in the light because you're down by, 1 damage. Okay. No, actually, yeah, it's the same amount of damage as 2 ultra heavies in a light. Take that back. But it's over time. And not just that, think about the positioning thing of I have 4 damage, I hypersonic speed around, loop, hit my opponent, the back of my opponent's character, and knock them 4 squares for me. It's 4 squares toward me to allow my other characters to attack that character. The amount of placement and control that is available with hypersonic super strength is stupid. You combine high movement, hypersonic speed, super strength with characters that are able to snatch characters, characters that are able to mind control, hell, characters that are able to capture. It's way stupider now than people actually know. So, yeah, get ready. And in the quote, TD Jakes is like, get ready. And then in a later sermon, he's like, I've been preaching about you getting ready. By now, you should have been ready. Yeah, that's what I'm telling y'all. Like, be ready for these changes. Be ready for how this game is going to switch up. Be ready to be adaptable. Get everything you need now. You will have an advantage later. Origins outside of the actual play does not matter for how you need to look at the meta. It is an utter waste of intellectual time. If you're not going, it's an utter waste of intellectual time. Do not worry about Rock. Do not worry about Origins. What you need to be looking at is when these new rules drop, whenever that happens, you're going to be in a position to dominate your opponents. And that right there is the game changer. And the people that are ready, they're going to be winning Rocktober. Those people are going to be winning Rocktober. All right, that's it for today's show. I'd like to thank you all for listening. If you want to find out when a new show is up, you can follow me on Twitter at StartOverPod. It came from outer space and said, man, you should have been in bed like 20 minutes ago. You can find out when a new show is up and, interesting musings. Very interesting random musings. You can email me at startingoverpodcast@gmail.com. That's startingoverpodcast@gmail.com. If you wish to opine, keep it piffy, keep it interesting, keep it awesome, baby. Tell me what you think about my predictions. Am I the spot on prophet? Is it a little bit too Nostradamus for you, or am I the raving mad lunatic running through the streets? And you can get a Phoenix Nest shirt in the link below. And that's about it. I'd like to thank you all for listening again. And remember, we all have to start over sometime.